He who knows only his own side of the case knows little of that. John Stuart Mill, English philosopher, political economist, politician, and civil servant. All right. Good morning. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad Podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. I am your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. What do I got for you today, folks? We're going to do a bill review. Why am I doing a bill review on Wednesday? Well, because I kind of skipped out on it on Monday. I didn't actually do a bill review, and that's when we're supposed to do bill reviews, right? Getting things all out of order. So we're going to do a bill review today. I think I'm going to do another one tomorrow because I have a couple in the queue that were sent to me from one of the audience members. So I'm going to do those. But this one came. This one first came across. I saw some videos on social media, and I was like, "Say what?" But I was intrigued, so I was like, we're gonna do these now. I'm gonna do it a little differently here. We're gonna dive right into the bill review right away. And it's actually pretty straightforward. It's not very difficult. It's like short. It's a relatively short one. We can actually go through it pretty quickly. But we're gonna do that first. Then we're gonna get into commentary after the intermission. So we'll dive right in straight away. So let's see. First, let me pull up some headlines here. So you some headlines of this bill. You know what are the headlines saying? So we've got Florida politics. Senate committee advances bill restricting preferred pronoun mandates. The policy of the state is that there's only two genders. Senate bill. This is from the Floridian. Senate bill would restrict use of pronouns in Florida workplaces. A bill is expected to be heard this week in the Florida legislature that would restrict using preferred pronouns in state workplaces. Now, it's interesting in the subheader there, or the sub by with the sub byline. Is that what I'm not sure what you call it? They point out state workplaces, but in the header it says workplaces, just Florida workplaces. Thought that was kind of interesting. Florida's Voice. They say bill restricting pronouns in the workplace passes despite outcry from public during committee stop. controversial bill that would restrict the use of preferred pronouns in Florida workplaces and limit gender identity training for state, blah, 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 goes on. So these are some of the headlines. We got a couple more here. This is the next set. LBGTQ advocates march to Florida Capitol to protest anti-DEI bills. So this was several days ago. They posted this wearing blue shirts that said, "Let us live." Protesters chanted, "This is what democracy looks like," in the fierce wind and rain. Florida Phoenix Senate committee okays misgendering of trans people in government jobs. Now, that's an interesting headline. They okay misgendering. Like, it's interesting. A hotly contested proposal that would prohibit the use of preferred pronouns in state and local government workplaces and limit gender, so on and so forth. Spectrum News, LGBTQ advocates to march in rally at Florida State Capitol. The group organized by Equality Florida is pushing back against a number of bills they say only harm the LGBTQ community. So this is some of the headlines regarding this bill. There were actually other bills. We're only going to get into one because I think I have a sufficient amount to say about this one particular bill. So let's take a look. Let's see what we got here. So I'm doing things a little differently. Okay. So if you're watching the show, instead of pulling up the whole bill and like walking through it and like on this page it says this and on this page it says that, we're just gonna do it like this. I'm gonna have just snippets from the bill, and we're just gonna kind of go through those snippets. So here now, and in bills, they define terms. And so it's always good to know what terms mean what, so that when you're reading it, you understand. Because sometimes in legislation, they'll use a term more narrowly or more broadly. And when that's the case, they definitely need to give you a definition. And in other cases, just to make sure that it's clear what they're talking about, they'll give you a definition. And these definitions are valuable and you need to know them. So, but you don't need to know all of them in this particular bill. For what we're talking about, just a couple will do. So here they've got employer means the state or any county, municipality, or special district or any subdivision or agency thereof. So they're limiting it to basically government. Government employer is employer in this particular case. So they're not talking about private employers. All right. So that's the first definition that we need to be aware of. The next one here, you probably won't be able to read it on the screen. I probably should have made this in two parts, and that's okay. But it says gender ideology. So they're defining gender ideology for the purposes of this bill. Means the false belief that replaces the biological category of sex with an ever shifting concept of self assessed gender identity, permitting the false claim that males can identify as and become women, and vice versa, and requiring all institutions of society to regard this false claim as true. I'm not a big fan of this definition already. So, when it comes to legislation, I don't think that legislation should be making value judgments, right? They should just be stating, this is what this is. You can do it. You cannot do it. If you do it or you don't do it and you were supposed to or not supposed to, then here are the punishments, right? Here's the punishment for violating this rule. That's how I see it. Very plain, to the point, and again, without judgment. So in this particular case, they're like, hey, this is a false belief. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But the bill doesn't need to include that. And then they go on and they say, permitting the false claim that males can identify as and become women. Now, while I agree with that, while I believe that males cannot become women, and in this particular case, I would say it should read men identifies and become women. So while I believe that men cannot become women, right? I don't think that we need to have it put into our legislation false claim. All right, what else does it say? It goes on and says the term includes the idea that there is a vast spectrum of genders that are disconnected from a person's sex. The term is internally inconsistent in that it diminishes sex as an identifiable or useful category, but nevertheless maintains that it is possible for a person to be born in the wrong sexed body. I This is just a very long and weighty definition. And to be honest with you, I don't know that you needed gender ideology at all in this particular bill, because this bill is called the Freedom of Conscience in the Workplace Act. And what they're trying to do is say, like, look, you cannot be forced to you cannot be forced yourself to identify by pronouns. You cannot be forced to use somebody else's pronouns as they prefer them, right? Like that's basically the gist of the bill. They just don't want you to be in trouble for using it, and they're applying it to government agencies. So for me, I look at it and say, I don't know that you really needed this in the bill. And we haven't even discussed whether or not the bill is even necessary. As a rule of thumb, I generally oppose bills. By the way, where is Bill? Let's get Bill out. Here, we got Bill right here. Let's get Bill out. Let's put Bill. I'm supposed to find somewhere to put Bill. Um, so so here we're already in definitions, and I'm not a big fan of what I'm seeing already. Let's continue on. Let's look into some of what the bill actually says. All right. So it says an employee. Now we know what an employee means, right? Because it defines an employee as somebody that works for an employer. We've defined an employer in this particular case as a government entity. So an employee or a contractor, they also define contractor, may not be required as a condition of employment or to avoid adverse personnel action to refer to another person using that person's preferred pronouns if such pronouns do not correspond to that person's sex. So they're like, look, you cannot be forced to do it. So if you work at the DMV and somebody there is named Fred, who was born a woman, who was born Jennifer, and Fred's like, look, I go by he, him, you need to use those pronouns. So they're saying, like, you can't be required to use their personal pronouns. That part I don't actually have a problem with. Here's why. Um, what is a pronoun? When is it used? If I'm let me look at somebody in the comments here. Let's see. Let's say my VA lady. Standard typical woman, right? I mean, in this context. She, her pronouns. She doesn't identify them like that. She just like, look, I'm a woman, use the pronouns as you would with the woman. It's pretty simple, right? Well, if I'm talking about my VA lady and I'm using pronouns, that means I'm not talking to her, talking to somebody else. So I might be talking to Joe, and I might say, hey, Joe, let me tell you about my VA lady. She's a great person. See what I did there? She. I'm talking about her to somebody else. My biggest beef with this whole pronoun, especially when it comes to requiring, is you're dictating the conversation between two people about a third person. Now, there are some situations where maybe I'm giving an award and I'm talking about somebody, and I say, all right, I'm going to bring up my VA lady because she said she's done such a wonderful job. Well, now I'm using pronouns, right? And I'm still talking about her, but now she might actually be present. But in most cases, when you're using somebody's pronouns, when you're using pronouns to refer to a person, you are talking about them in their absence. And I would say most cases, right? There are some cases where the person might be present. You're not going to just use somebody's name repeatedly in front of them. You're not going to be like, yeah, so Joe did this, and then Joe did this. And then you're going to at some point say, and then he did this. And then, I was going with him, right? But again, you're still talking about somebody to another person, even if they're present. So my whole beef with this whole pronoun thing has always been like, why are you dictating how I talk about you to somebody else? Now, in libertarian circles, it's very commonly understood that you do not own your reputation, right? Like the what people think about you, how they describe you, you don't get a choice. So if I were to say I have personal adjectives, right? Like my adjectives are awesome, great, benevolent, brilliant, wise. Like I can't dictate that you use those when you're talking about me. It's the same concept, right? I have a vision of who I am, and I am trying to impose upon you that when you are talking about me to another person or persons, that you must use specific language. That's not acceptable to me. So in these terms, I'm okay with saying you cannot be required to do it. Now, if you want to do it, like if you work at the DMV and you've got Jennifer, somebody was born Jennifer, they now identify as Fred. They've got a short haircut. Maybe they've got a little stubble on their face, right? They're wearing men's clothing. And if you want to refer to Fred as a he, fine. I take no issue with that. But you shouldn't be required to. All right, let's continue on to the next element of this that we're going to look at. All right, so here we go. And it says an employee or a contractor may not require an employer to use his or her preferred pronouns if such preferred pronouns do not correspond to the employee's or contractor's sex. Now, I almost agree with this. Almost. I think it should have stopped at an employee or a contractor may not require an employer to use his or her preferred pronouns. Boom. Done. That's it. Doesn't matter whether they correspond to the employee's or contractor's sex. I think that's irrelevant information. Just say like, look, you you can't require somebody to use them, right? And if you're the person, you can't impose upon others how they're going to talk about you. Right. Now that sounds like a conflict. Like, well, that just means we're going to be, what's going to happen is most people are going to look at somebody and they are generally going to try to be a good person. And if they see that you're looking like a woman or a man, most people, especially if you're not a jerk about it, most people will try to give you that courtesy, right? So you don't have to worry about, and there will always be people that don't want to give you the courtesy. And that happened long before the gender issue. So let me give you an example. My ex-wife, her her stepdad was telling me a story, and this was years ago, of course. And he was saying that there was a particular, I think he was in management, and there was a particular manager that was over him that was really obnoxious and a jerk. And I can't remember what it was, but there was some dispute, and he finally got mad and he said, "You can call me Mr. So and so." And that way he just laid down the law. He's like, "You call me Mr. So and so, or I won't be talking to you." Period. Plain and simple. Right. This kind of thing has happened. Like people can be disrespectful on purpose or just out of laziness. And it might cause somebody to lay down the law basically and say, look, if you want me to respond to you, this is how you will address me. Otherwise, I'm just going to ignore you. Now it sounds kind of like, oh, DL, that just sounds like a recipe for blowing things up at the workplace and having all kind of all. Not really. Why? Because we've had this before and we've already as a society worked it out. Are there cases where it doesn't work out quite the way that we would like? That is true. Yes. There have been people out there that are like, hey, my name is Daniel, not Danny. Don't call me Danny. I don't like it. And then somebody continues and they persist in calling this person Danny. And so then finally Daniel gets mad. I'm using me as an example now. Then finally Daniel gets mad and says, you know what? Just call me sir. Like, or I'm not going to respond to you If you can't seem to get it right, I'm not going to respond to you. Like that's happened. And then sometimes Daniel might have to bite the bullet, and so is just simply unwilling, and they will just call him Danny, right? But we work this out amongst ourselves. So I think you could just leave it in law because, and the reason I say that we can leave this in the law um, is that we are dealing with how people are to be engaged or engage with others in the workplace in government. Now, if this had been extended to private organizations, I would have squashed the bill altogether. Like the moment that employer meant private employer, I'd have been like, nope, none of your business. Because employer A can, as far as I'm concerned, they can put in the rules and say, all right, you have to use somebody's preferred pronoun. And then employer B can say, yeah, we don't do that here. Figure it out amongst yourselves. Don't be a jerk. If you cause a lot of problems, we'll take you into HR and we'll figure this out. Maybe we'll fire both of you. Right. Like they can do, like as far as I'm concerned, that's how a free market would work. So here they could have just left it at an employee or a contractor may not require an employer to use his or her preferred pronouns. Done deal. All right, what's next? Let's see. We got a couple more items here. All right, here we go. A job application or other related employment form that requires an applicant to mark his or her sex may only inquire if the applicant is male or female. It may not provide a non-binary or other option. I'm kind of on the fence on this one. Like there is a such thing as intersex. It's like a rare thing, like the actual condition of intersex. But otherwise, I'm like, I don't know, like, should it really even be on there? Like, does it really matter? I suppose it does in government. I suppose companies might want to be able to just like quickly look and say, here's how many men are applying for this job. Here's how many women have applied for it. How many people of this age or that age. So I would imagine that there's probably some desire for demographic information, and that's fine. I don't take an issue. So I'm kind of on the fence, again, like I think we're getting too bogged down in all of this. People want jobs. They want to come and, do a service, get paid for that service, go home and enjoy Netflix. And I feel like we're getting really caught up in what people call you. Right. And we're going to see more about that here in just a few moments. All right. What else? We got one last one, I believe here. Yeah, there's one last one. All right. It is unlawful. It is an unlawful employment practice for the state or any county, municipality, special district, or other political subdivision to require as a condition of employment any training, instruction, or other activity on sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. I'm actually okay with this. Again, in the context of government workplace. Now, if this was private, like again, the private entities can do what they want. Whether they and that means they could go all in on this, or they could be like, yeah, we don't do that. We're going old school. We're gonna do it like the 90s. Figure it out yourselves. Work it out amongst yourself. And if it doesn't work for you, maybe you find a different employer. That's always an option. And we never want to have that conversation because it sounds bad. Like what somebody would have to go and find it. Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes the workplace environment is toxic and you find somewhere else to work. That's how it goes. So when it comes to this bill, let's see, I got to give it a final yay or nay, right? So just my reading of the bill, I find too many problems with it. So that didn't work, right? I got, hold on. Let's do this. How about we do it this way? There it goes. Like it came out. I had the audio setting wrong. So yeah, I'm gonna fail this bill. Um, it's like how many pages was it again? It was 6 pages. Is that what it was? Um, Something like that. Where's my notes? I forgot. Yeah, 6 pages. It's got a companion bill in the House. This is a Senate bill for the state of Florida. It's got a companion bill. I didn't look at that bill, but I read through this one. 6 pages seems kind of long. Seems kind of unnecessary. I think at best you could just add to your to the workplace rules and say, look, you can't force somebody to use somebody else's pronoun. You can't insist and demand that somebody use their pronoun and leave it at that. Like that should have been sufficient. So let's take some comments here, and then we will. Let's see here. Let's do it this way. There, some comments. Let's take a look and see what y'all are saying. So, by the way, you are all set up here if you wanted to comment on X. I'm getting this down, right? Like I'm getting good at this. Let's see what we got here. Um, yes, always. My VA lady says, do me a solid, hit the thumbs up on the way in. Don't forget to share this live stream. Make sure to subscribe, follow, and hit the bell so that you always know when Liberty Dad is going live. Absolutely, I would appreciate it, especially if you are on Rumble. I'm trying to get to that 100 follower mark so that I can get in on their program. I'm trying to, just beef up, this podcast, grow it. So do what you can to help me out, folks. Let's see what else. Joe says, get the government out of this. JFC. Yeah, I agree. Like we're spending a lot of time on what I would argue are trivial matters that people can work out amongst themselves. And in some cases, like again, you find somewhere else to work. And I've had to do that, not for gender related issues, right? Not the company that I work for now, but the company that I used to work for. It was a toxic environment. They took advantage of me. At one point, I told my manager, the guy that was overseeing all the developers, I told him because they kept making excuses to give me a pay raise, and they were like, "Oh, it's because you didn't do this," and I was like, "I did do that," and they're like, "Yeah, well, it's because of this," and I'm like, "Yeah, but that's also not a good reason because this is my counterpoint," and they just kept making excuses, and so finally I got pissed one day, and I was like, "Look, you're getting a service that you're not paying for," and that lead, that head of all the developers, he was like, "I'll be sure to let so and so know about this. Thank you," and I was like, "Ooh." Because so and so was the CEO of the company, and I was like, "Oh, did I just shoot my mouth off?" But I stuck to my guns, and eventually, it just came down to where I said, "I'm leaving. I quit." I put in my resignation, and I left because it wasn't going to get any better. And that's just how some work environments go. There are any number of places, and some of them are good, some of them are bad, because some places they have a particular vibe, and maybe you don't fit that vibe. And to be honest with you, that's okay. So yeah, get the government out of this it would be the best answer, in my opinion. Let people work it out, because I just don't think that this is an issue that is worth legislation. If there had been legislation that I would accept, it would be really, really tiny. And even then, it may not even be worth it. So absolutely, Joe, you're correct. Let's see what else we got. Let's see, my VA lady, since I was talking about her, says, yeah, where's Bill? There he is. Sorry, Bill, if I misgendered you. I'm a he. So you didn't misgender Bill. He's good. Besides, if Bill gets pissy about misgendering, I'll fire him. And he don't get to be on the show anymore. Let's see what else we got. Kagela says, Bill has telepathically informed me that he wants an oogaza. I can't even say it. I know what he's saying. I know what it was a ooga buzzer. It was written correctly. I can't read. A ooga buzzer. So maybe I'll try to find that. I will look. I will dig into that. Yes, my VA lady points out Liberty Dad is 12 away from 100 on Rumble. So get me there, folks. Go to Rumble right now. Sign up if you have to. And then like my show so that I can get in on this cool program and grow the program. Right? That's what we're trying to do around here. All right, folks, let's go to intermission. We'll come back and we're going to talk a little bit more about we're going to talk more about this bill. There's more actually. Yes. Hey, Liberty fam, do me a favor. If you enjoy the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to my channel. And for the really serious folks out there, I want you to hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. By the way, if you want to support the show, head over to libertydad.locals.com and sign up. For $5, you can be part of this show. There, I'll engage supporters of the show. We'll discuss topics that you want me to talk about, response videos that you would like to see, or anything related to the show. And I'll even have a monthly subscribers only episode. By the way, I'm always looking for dads to join me for Dad Talk. That's my series where I invite everyday dads on to talk about what's important to them in the context of being a dad. No argument, no debate, and dads choose the topic. It's my way of raising dad voices. If you're a dad or you know a dad who has something to say, let's get connected. Episodes air live on Friday mornings or Friday evenings, whichever works best for dads. All right, let's get back to the show. All right, we're back. So let's talk about some reactions to this bill, because this came across my wire. There's a organization, a news entity called Florida Voice, and they had one of my mutuals on social media had reposted their post, which had which talked about this bill briefly, linked to their article, but also had some video footage of people opposing the bill. So we're gonna watch this video, and I got some thoughts here. So let's see what we got. Perhaps.
It's kind of pointless, I can't lie. What is someone's pronouns affecting you? No one's forcing you to use them.
Okay. So let's stop right here. She's like, no one's forcing you to use these pronouns. This is a very disingenuous argument by the, I'm gonna call them the pronoun folks. It's a very, and what I mean by that is that the people that insist that you use pronouns, I'm gonna call you the pronoun folks. This is a very interesting argument because on one hand, they'll go, it's no big deal. So like, it takes a second to use somebody's correct what does it harm you? So that they on one hand want to present it as if it's like no big deal. But then when you don't use it, man, do they screech to high heaven. They're like, oh my God, you misgendered me. And if you watch, some of the crazier activists will tell you that by misgendering somebody, you practically kill them. Because what they do is what their argument is, they're like, this person, we're going to go back to Jennifer and Fred again. Somebody was born Jennifer. They decided to become Fred. You misgender them and you're like, yeah, you're really a she. And they're like, you put me at risk of violence, because the idea being that you've outed them, you've dead named them, you've outed them to their peers. And so now, and it's like, no, wait a minute. First of all, let's be clear. Most of you, everybody already knows. I know that you think that if you put on a wig or you grow your hair long and you do a couple things, maybe you dye your hair, you like whatever. It's very clear who you are. In most cases, we can tell if you were born a male or a female. So you're not really hiding from anybody. So this whole idea of like, you've misgendered me, now everybody knows. We already knew. And don't turn around and tell me it's no big deal when people use the wrong gender, if you will, that you make it a big deal. Either it's a big deal or it's not. Pick a side, right? All right, let's continue on.
This bill does nothing to improve lives for Floridians in any way.
See, I want you just see what I mean? Look at it. Look at this person. And I'm not trying to make fun of him, right? On this show, we try to not make fun of regular, everyday, average people, right? Occasionally it might happen. We try to keep that for politicians and people in the public sphere, like, other podcast host, somebody that's, famous, whatever, those kind of things, right? We try to limit, because I just don't think it's good behavior. I want to do better than that. But look at this person. Is there any doubt that this person was not born a man? So the idea that misgendering this person is going to somehow alert others to something that they didn't already know is absurd, right? It doesn't make sense.
It opens an opportunity for a small percentage of our population to be targeted, to be kept from job opportunities, to be kept from dignity.
Okay, so this is what they're talking about, the bill I just reviewed. And so their objection to this idea of like eliminating pronoun use is to say, like, we're going to be kept from job opportunities. How are you kept from a job opportunity? You can still go and get a job at the DMV. You just can't say, I demand that you refer to me as he, him when you were born a woman. You don't get to say that. That's it, right? Otherwise, you can still have the job. So the argument doesn't even make sense. Let's continue on.
Application checkbox. Let me tell you, as an intersex person, that an intersex option would have to be added because there is more than just female and male.
Okay, so technically they are correct. There is intersex. But again, let's talk. Does it matter in the grand scheme of things when you're trying to get a job? What do you like? What's most important to you? That people focus in and cater to every whim of yours based on your identity, or that they give you a job, train you, and pay you for performing a service or producing something? Which one matters to you? Because for, I don't know, century, what has mattered to people is that they get a job. That's what matters. And you can work out the details when you get there. And people have done that, right? Like DL is not my legal name. However, if you go to my company, virtually everybody knows me by DL. It's on all my it's on my email signature. It's not my legal name. People are willing to do that. There are people that go by their middle name, right? Instead of their first name. And that's how they're referred to. And sometimes it appears on maybe not quite legal documents, but documents that, are formal for sure. So this happens. We've already done all of this stuff. And so I would argue that people are making it more difficult than it really should be. If you are somebody that's like, look, I just identify as a woman, I think there are better ways to go about it. Let's continue.
Continues your goal as stated last year by Madam Chair to eradicate the trans community. My name is Mandy. My pronouns are they, them.
This is setting up.
Okay. So now they want to talk about eradicating the trans community. This kind of craziness, this absurdity, you are not being eradicated because somebody refuses to engage in the conversation how you believe they should. That's it. You know what eradicating means? Like, we eradicated measles. How did we eradicate measles? we got to the point where we were so low on cases that it was basically gone, right? But we did that in a very active state. We said, we're going to immunize people and we're going to, improve our sanitation. We're going to do the active things with the intent to get rid of it. That's not the intent here. The intent is just to say, like, look, you can't do this. You can't force it. Didn't say you can't be somebody who's identifies in a different way. It doesn't say we're going to remove you from society. It doesn't say that we're going to lock you up. You're not going to be punished for being this. We're just simply saying, like in this bill, it's just simply saying you can't impose upon other people. That's it.
People to be killed, which is honestly the entire point, because what does it matter how we die, be it murder, suicide, or starvation?
I don't even know what starvation had to do with anything. I assume that this person is going along and saying, like, look, if I can't have a job, I can't have money. Then if I can't have money, then I can't feed myself. And so therefore I'll starve. And that's what you're trying to do. But again, you're not being limited from a job opportunity, right? Now, here's the other thing. And I give libertarians a hard time over this. I've done it in the past and they get mad at me because I'm like, look, if you're going to go and run for office, depending, not always, but in many cases, you should probably dress for the part, right? You should dress and make sure that you look like somebody that voters will want to vote for based on the role. If you're running for president, you should probably always be seen, almost always be seen in a suit and a tie, right? Like, that's just how it should work, right? Because that's the expectation that people have when they're voting for you. If it's a lower position, you could get, like local or something like that, you can possibly get away with more casual look, right? But again, it depends. You gotta figure this out. You've got to work it out. But there is a time and a place for your appearance. I'm going to argue and say that if you show up to the state capitol to oppose a bill, you should probably put on your best looking clothing so that you don't look like a crazy person, right? And this has been one of the arguments against the trans community, the trans activists more specifically, is that a lot of them go further. Like if they say, like, I identify as a woman, the argument has been, well, they go further than just trying to look like a woman. They look more like a caricature of a woman, an exaggerated version of a woman, almost almost to the point of drag. And it's like, well, how am I supposed to take you seriously if you're telling me that you are literally a woman, but you look more like somebody in drag than my wife or many of the other women that I know? And I know trans people who are like, look, they've grown their hair. Like I know men that are trans women, I believe that's the right term, right? And they don't go out of their way to look anything other than exactly what they say they are. They say they are a woman, they try to look like a woman. They grow their hair long, they wear women's clothing, but they don't exaggerate it, right? They dress and look just like any other woman. Now we can still tell in many cases, most cases you can still tell, but their appearance is just as simple as it can be. So if you go to the state capitol, and I've said this even to libertarians, I'm like, look, if you go to the state capitol, perhaps you should wear more than a t-shirt and dirty jeans. Perhaps. I mean, it depends, right? Again, on a multitude of factors. If there's a bill that has to do with, I don't know, plumbers, right? It's gonna do something. It's gonna add more rules or whatever local rules for plumbers. Well, the plumbers may show up in their plumber outfit, right? Work boots, jeans, and a t-shirt. Maybe the t-shirt has their company name on it. That would be fine. That makes sense. You're representing, a worker in this particular case. But if you're just showing up to oppose a general bill, you should probably dress appropriate so that people will take you seriously. Why? It's an age-old concept. You have a few seconds to make a good first impression. And if I look at you and you look like somebody who's going to a drag show, and we're not talking about a bill that's about drag, then I'm going to take you a little bit less serious. And that's how society works. Everybody gets it, right? I'm short. I'm sure people make judgments based on my short stature. I'm bald. People will make a judgment based on that. They'll make a judgment based on the fact that I have a beard, right? People will do that. If I show up at the bank and I'm wearing a suit and a tie and I'm going to make a transaction, people are going to have an impression that's a little bit different than if I show up at the bank wearing dirty clothes. They're just going to have a different impression, right? In fact, I'll prove it to you. I it was like 2016. I just got back, or no, it's 2015, I think. I got back from a trip to Indonesia and I bought this this kind of like avant-garde sport coat. And it doesn't have like your typical collar that you would normally see. It was very avant-garde looking. I would show it to you, but I don't have it handy at the moment. But anyway, I was proud of it. I liked it. I thought it was great. So I was wearing it everywhere, right? And I think I was wearing like jeans, a t-shirt, and this sport coat. And I went to the bank. And as I was getting ready, I was getting close to the door. A man that was coming out, an older man, older than me, he holds open the door, and this is what he said to me. He goes, "You look like you have more money than me. Let me hold the door for you." And I laughed, and I said, "Well, I don't know about that, sir." And then I said, "But thank you." And then I went into the bank. And like he had an impression about me just by looking at me. He looked at me and he just assumed I must have a lot of money and I must be even more than he has, however much he had, right? People make judgments about you based on the way you look. So if you're saying you're a trans person or you're non-binary and you're showing up, and I'm just gonna lay it out straight for you, and you look like you're going to the circus, that's not a good start. Appearance matters, whether you like it or not. And you got to stop with the exaggeration and the hyperbole. Nobody is trying to kill you. I mean, there are people that might in very rare situations. That's on the same level as people getting murdered by a gang member, right? Like it happens, but it's not like this, like people in the trans community will try and go, oh, they're trying to eradicate us and all that. Like, stop, just stop. I went through the bill and I denied this bill, right? And I didn't like, look how I'm dressed. I'm dressed like an everyday average person. And I walked through the bill and I said, yeah, here's a problem with this. Here's a problem with this. Here's a problem with this. Yeah, I don't think it's a good bill. Very simple. You could have went and made those arguments. You should have went and made those arguments. They would have been better arguments. And you would have looked more sane and intelligent than getting up there and saying crazy stuff like, they're trying to eradicate us. Doesn't matter how we die, whether we die by suicide, murder, or starvation. Like, that doesn't even make sense. If you die of starvation, we're going to be like, yeah, that was a tragedy. What in the world happened? If you die from murder, we're going to be like, yo, this person needs to be put in jail. Some people would advocate that they get the death penalty. But no, so it does matter how you die, and we will treat it differently. So stop exaggerating. All right. There was another video that Florida Voice posted. Same context here. These are people that went and opposed the bill. So, but this is a little different. So I want to play this video real quick.
It's very obvious that this bill is one made out of hatred and also a gross misunderstanding of science.
Okay, so let's start right here. I hate when people say that, and they say this all the time about, like, it's obvious this is this. Like, no, it's actually not that obvious. What about this bill makes it obvious that it's out of hatred? It might be, right? Republicans did it, and Republicans have been kind of like fighting back and in some sense maybe waging a war against trans activists, right? And I do mean that intentionally, trans activists, not the trans community, but trans activists, right? But what's obvious that this is out of hatred? I mean, we are in a position in society where it is being demanded that we use pronouns. We are in a position right now where activists will tell you, if you dead name somebody, if you misgender somebody, you are trying to kill them. Right? That's a huge claim. Big claim. So then if other people go, yeah, I think you're exaggerating a little bit. We're not having a normal, rational conversation where you say, hey, you're trying to eradicate us. And I go, yeah, is that really true? Let's look at the facts. I think you're exaggerating, engaging in a little hyperbole here, and maybe you need to back up a wee bit. And then that person go, okay, fair enough. You're right. My language is a bit strong. Let's dial it down a little bit. We're not having that kind of a conversation. We're literally having these conversations in the extreme. So what makes this bill out of hatred? It's not obvious. No, it's not. And many other things that people like to say, well, it's obvious that, no, it's not obvious. Most of the times it's not obvious. It's kind of like when people say literally all the time, they're like, I literally went outside. Yes, that's what going outside means. You literally walk out the door. Like, you didn't have to add the literally there. It's an improper, and I'm not trying to be a grammar Nazi. I'm just saying, like, in terms of communication, in terms of, properly representing ideas, that's not what's happening here. Let's continue, because she starts talking about the science now.
I'm a sociologist. I know that the research shows that their sex and gender are different and that gender identity is something that actually exists. I also want to say to the previous speaker and in general that, First Amendment also protects the rest of us who are marginalized and want to be referred to as our pronouns in work and should be able to do so.
Okay, so I don't really know what the First Amendment has to do with your pronouns. Like, the First Amendment would, I guess, protect you for saying I am he, her, they, them, whatever, right? I guess you could qualify that and say that the government can't stop you from referring to yourself, and that's fine. But in terms of the context of this bill, I don't really know what the First Amendment has to do with anything. Now, I will say this. She did come across rationally, right? She was calm. She made that one, absurd claim at the very beginning that it was obvious, but, like, otherwise calm and rational, and that's fine. And I don't take too much issue with her appearance. However, many people have noted again that people in the genderqueer space have a tendency to be brightly colored with their hair, with their clothing, you know, and again, you stand out. You stand out on purpose. When you stand out like that, people don't take you serious. Like if you who is his Alex Stein, if you go back and you look at some of the videos of him going to, like, I think it was his local city council, and he would dress in weird, bizarre outfits and then do these song and dance while he was talking about, some piece of legislation or something that the council was doing. Like it was clearly intended to be theatrical. And that's why he wasn't wearing like this, just a normal shirt and some pants. Like he went in there and he would wear all this crazy stuff. He would like wear tutus and just stuff that you wouldn't normally wear. And it was intended to kind of be outlandish and stand out and part of the mockery. So you understand how, like, I'm not just criticizing the gendered community, if you or the genderqueer community, just to be mean. I'm saying, like, look, I'm applying the same standards everywhere else. You are no different. If you want to be taken seriously, act like it, look like it. Now, regarding the science, she's like, I'm a sociologist. Sociologists may or may not know the science. So let's listen to somebody who is a sex neuroscientist, also a former feminist. I think she might still identify as a feminist, but she's one of the earlier ones. There's like different waves of feminism. She's definitely not the current wave of feminism. She's more of an old school feminist, right? The kind that as a conservative, I would have disputed and disagreed with 20 years ago. But today I'm like, you're kind of rational, actually. Go figure. So this is Dr. Deborah So. She's a sex neuroscientist. This video comes from Dr. Phil. She was on Dr. Phil's show a couple of years ago. And she wrote a book called The End of Gender. I recommend it. It's a very good book. But I want you to listen to what she's talking about. I've clipped it a little bit just to kind of narrow in on what I think is relevant to what the young woman we just listened to said. So let's play that video real quick, and we'll see what Dr. Deborah So has to say.
Dr. So, why do you think young people are being incorrectly diagnosed with gender dysphoria? And should those who are wait to get transitions?
So he asked her a question. Now, this isn't entirely directly related to what we're talking about, but he's like, why do you think they're incorrectly diagnosed? Okay. So we are talking about the science. That's what she's going to be getting into a little bit. She's talking about the science. And toward the end, that's going to be the most critical part of this clip here.
Absolutely. There should be a longer period of time. And most importantly, there needs to be a proper assessment done. I really take issue with this narrative that children, quote unquote, know their true selves, or they know their gender identity if they believe that they're transgender, or that detransition is purely due to social stigma or due to transphobia. If you actually talk to detransitioners, as I have, you'll hear the reasons as to why they have chosen to detransition, why they have regret about their decisions, in many cases having undergone medicalization. There's so many other issues that these young people are struggling with, whether it is being on the autism spectrum. They have, many of them, if not all I've spoken to, have a history of sexual trauma. They are not comfortable with their sexuality if they are gay. They may have anxiety, depression, and in some cases, as in Ryan's case, if it's a young woman who reaches puberty, is not comfortable in her body, she thinks that because she doesn't like being sexualized by society, that means that she's actually a man, or she's so-called non-binary, even though there are only two genders.
Okay, so we'll pause it here for a second. So she's going into it and she's saying, like, look, there's more to this story here. There are people that believe they are, like, say, non-binary, or that they're a different gender, but the actual case is they could have autism, they could be gay, they could have endured sexual trauma, they could just simply be uncomfortable in their body and haven't quite got used to it yet. This is especially the case for young girls. It has been the case for so long. So the science here, according to Dr. So, is kind of like, hey, there's more to this, and there may be people, and she's specifically talking about young people. There may be young people who are identifying as such, and so they're doing so because they've misunderstood what's happening to them, or they misunderstood why they're feeling that way, and that for them the answer is something else. That's part of the science. So therefore, it doesn't make sense that we can start imposing upon people and saying, you have to use this pronoun, because we could be doing a disservice to somebody who might believe that they're trans, or genderqueer, but in fact have something else going on. So it's not clear it's out of hate, because there's an argument to be made. Now, when it comes to the science, there's more to that. Here's what she said. She went on to say about the science.
Especially with this ideology, we see it coming into education. We see it being glorified in society, with the fact that legitimate experts cannot speak about the science, that legitimate studies cannot be done. Actual science that is correct is being suppressed, is being denied, is being called hateful. And so people are understandably terrified to talk about this. And if you are in the field, whether you're an academic, I mean, my reason for leaving academia is because I wasn't willing to stay quiet about this issue. If you do work within, say, academia, if you're a scientist, you cannot produce any research that goes against activist narratives, or they will completely destroy you.
Okay. So her argument is the science isn't even complete because activists aren't allowing the science to be done. Now, is there any evidence to support her claim? This was actually a couple of years ago, this video that she was on, Dr. Phil. And I don't have it pulled up at the moment, but I'll just tell you about it. There was a study that had come out, and it suggested that there were a lot of problems with the idea of gender as we understand it. And what we later found out, like within a week or two, is that I think it was the scientists who did the research withheld the science that they had done. They withheld the research because they were like, we don't want it being weaponized against the trans community. So I want you to think about that for a second. Somebody did some research. The results did not fit the narrative. So they withheld the science, the research, so that it couldn't be seen, so that people couldn't use it against people that are demanding that you use their pronouns, people that are demanding that you allow a child to use, to undergo social transitioning, even against the parent's will. So no, things aren't clear, young lady. No, we're not clear on the science either, right? Because it's being withheld. So this is the basis for my quote today. Like, do you know the other side? If you don't, you're doing yourself a disservice and the idea a disservice. So I thought this bill was pretty interesting because there was a lot that you could get out of not only the bill, but the conversations that people are having. I think that, this bill, I would stand right next to all those people who oppose it. I oppose it on different grounds. I oppose it on grounds based on what it actually says, by reading it and discerning it and saying, I think this is inappropriate for these given reasons, right? I don't have to get into speculation. I don't have to get into hyperbole and suggest that everybody's trying to kill people. Like, that's just absurd. And there are better ways to address this stuff. Why would you want to go these better paths? Because you can get more people on your side if you don't seem like a crazy person. If you come across as crazy, there are people that I know that I follow on social media or that I interact with occasionally or what have you, right? I see them in passing maybe, and they'll say stuff, but because of their reputation, I don't like their stuff. I don't promote it, right? I don't say, yeah, this person got it right, because I want to stay far away from that reputation, right? That's how the real world works. If you want people's buy-in, you want to convince people of something, number one, don't demand it. Number two, don't be absurd, right? Don't engage in exaggeration. Everybody's out to try to kill you. I mean, I want you to think about this for a second. While they're saying like, hey, and this has been a mantra, in the trans community. They're trying to kill us. They're trying to eradicate us. Okay. So how is it that you felt safe enough to go to the state capitol with a bunch of people that you don't know? Some of them might support the bill. Some of them don't support the bill. How is it that you felt safe enough to go there and argue on record with your name? Like, you go there and you fill out a card and you're like, my name is, DL Cummings. I'm here to talk about this. I live at, 123 Mulberry Lane. You put you give them identifying information to be there. And you felt comfortable enough to go and object to this bill because the bill was going to try to eradicate you. Right? Does that make sense? No, it doesn't. This is why people aren't buying your side. They're not on your side. Should this bill be rejected? Yes, it should be rejected. For the reasons you said? No, not for those reasons. So if you get your act together, one, you can probably, if you get your act together, you can probably have your cake and eat it too. Right? You can be a different gender. Most people will probably respect you and just be like, yeah, it's Fred, whatever. Don't care. Because people probably don't care enough to make a big argument until you first make a big stink of it. If you make a big stink, that's what made Jordan Peterson famous. That's how he got his initial fame, right? He pushed back and he said, I'm not going to be forced to use gender or specific pronouns. And he took a stand against the Canadian government. And he said, nope, this is an inappropriate use of speech. You're forcing people to engage in speech that they don't want to speak, they don't want to engage in. It's not acceptable. And that's how he rose to fame, because he was pushing back against people making demands, not people saying, hey, as a courtesy, let's work this out, blah, 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 just like every other person has had to work out, somebody who's been a jerk in the workplace. So there you go, folks. That's my show. Let's see what else we got in the comments here. Let's see. On social, I keep wanting to say social media. It's all social media. On X, David Moscrip says, you're killing that bill, Epstein style. Yeah, I think that's a good thing. And he said, yep, my mom always said to leave the house like you expect to bump into the president. That's true. I hold that to my son. My son is not like I'm trans dad or any of that stuff, right? He's just a little boy, a normal, standard little boy that turns everything into a gun and then screams way too loudly, sometimes with a high pitch because his voice hasn't cracked yet, right? He's a very standard, typical little boy. And when he's going out, first thing I do is I look and see what he's wearing. And I'm like, where are we going? Certain clothes are not appropriate for where we're going. And it's not that he dresses up. I don't make him go and put on, nice slacks that are ironed with a button-up shirt. I'm just like, no, those he's got gym shorts. He likes to wear gym shorts and tank tops. And so if we go to like a restaurant, I'm like, you're not going to a restaurant in that, right? Like, that's fine if you're going to the gym or if you're going to the park to play, fine. That's cool. Like, you can play in that. But if we're going to church, again, he doesn't have to dress up per se, but we have certain clothes that are appropriate for standard going out to places. And then we have other clothes which are not appropriate for that, but they're appropriate maybe for going to the gym or going to play or just running around the house, right? I do that in my own house. I do that with myself. If I'm going to Lowe's or Home Depot and I'm in the middle of working and I'm dirty, I go, right? Because I'm working. Oh, you know what? My music. There. Music. So yes, leave the house like you are expecting to bump into the president. Let's see. We got anything on Facebook? Nothing on Facebook. Facebook people are quiet. So let's see what we got in the live chat here. Let's go back here. This is a good point here. Kagela says, clowns get attention, but do people listen to them? That's true. If you look like a clown, and I know this is like the genderqueer folk, look, I'm not trying to be mean to you. I'm trying to help you. Like, you look like a caricature of a man or a woman in many cases. And you talk like it, in more cases than that. Stop it. Just act normal, right? Just like, hey, I'm this kind of a person. It's what I like. Please refer to me as she. Thank you so much. My name is Jennifer. Okay, cool, whatever. Some people will do it. Many people will do it. Some people, Nah, they're going to be a jerk. And some people are going to be a jerk, period. Get over it. Let's see. That Liberty lady. Ugh, feminism. I am feminine, but absolutely not a feminist. I had to say it in my strong voice. Let's see. My VA lady says, Alex Stein is loud and sticks out like a sore thumb. I like to blend into the crowd, not stand out. Honestly, there is a time and a place to stand out, and there's a time and a place, many time and places, where you should just kind of go with the flow. Like, it's better that you don't stand out. Let's see here. What else we got? Joe says, I dressed up when I went to the state capitol with AFP. That's Americans for Prosperity. It was fun pretending, but it was all BS. Perhaps. But if you dress up when you're going to the state capitol, you will be taken more seriously before you even open your mouth. That's just the way it goes. And maybe you don't want to dress up and wear like a suit and a tie. Maybe you don't even have one. Wear clean jeans and your nicest shirt that you got, right? Do that so that people will take you seriously. And then read the bill and then talk about what the bill actually says and what it, and disregard what it doesn't say. Set that stuff aside. Just talk normal. You'll be better off. I promise you, folks. We can all work this out. It's doable, and we don't need all these laws. All right, folks. That's it for my show today. I'm going to head on out, and thanks for tuning in. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you are there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. You can also become part of the community by heading over to libertydad.locals.com. Remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.